Good evening, everyone. It is 6:30. I hereby call the King William Board of Zoning Appeals meeting to order. Ms. Grover, could you call the roll?
Ms. Walker,
Here.
Ms. Broadus,
Here.
Ms. White, Mr. Nolan,
Here.
and Mr. Schumacher.
Here. Want to welcome Mr. Wagner from the Planning Commission. Next, we have the review and the adoption of the meeting agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting agenda as presented.
I make a motion we approve. Second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the agenda and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The meeting agenda is adopted. Next, we have the approval of the minutes for January 26th. Assuming everyone had a chance to review them, are there any further changes? Thank you. If not, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
A motion that we accept the minutes as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
A second.
Ms. Grover, can you call for the votes?
Ms. Broadus,
Yes.
Mr. Nolan,
Yes.
Ms. Walker,
Yes.
and Mr. Schumacher.
Yes. Approved. We also have before us the approval of the minutes from our last meeting on March 23rd. Are there any changes for the March 23rd minutes? If not, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes as presented.
Okay, I have a motion to accept the minutes as presented. Do I have a second? I'll second it. Okay. We properly second. Ms. Grover, would you call for the votes?
Ms. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Nolan,
Yes.
Ms. Broadus,
Yes.
and Mr. Schumacher.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Grover. Okay, next we have the public comment period. If you wish to speak on non-public hearing matters not related to this evening's variance request, now is the time to do so. Be sure to state your name and district that you're a part of. Ms. Grover will be our technical assistant, and if you're on Zoom and you wish to speak, please indicate by raising your hand or press dialing *9 on your phone. Again, this is for non-public hearing matters not related to this evening's variance request. The public comment period is now open. Okay, hearing no participants, I'll go ahead and close the public comment period. Next on the agenda, we have the public hearing for variance request V-02-22, owner applicant Zachary Lewis. We'll conduct the hearing based on our rules of procedure. Ms. Grover, would you start us off, please?
So the application we have is for Zachary Lewis at 129 Etna Mills Road, and he's requesting a variance to reduce the required front yard setback from 75 feet to approximately 18.7 to construct a 30 by 30 detached metal garage in the front yard. So this is a picture of the aerial of the property. And so I'm going to step to the screen. And so this is the location of the small building. And the setback, side setback, that you'll see. So right now it's 31.1. The requirement is 25 feet from the exit on secondary road. And the front setback that she's asking is 18.7. The requirement is 75 feet. So as you can see, the surveyor is 18.7, and this is the side 39.1. And all along here, doesn't quite show it, but there is an actual pond negotiation on this one here. This is actually Franklin Health Department, so we have health department approval. So this is the location on the other side of the property of the actual second, location and the well. And this is the location of the tank.
The health department made a comment that it was encroaching upon the well.
So the proposed use will encroach upon the existing on-site sewage disposal system and or water supplies with the review from the health department.
I think it's a mistake with the work. And that is because it's not. And not set back, but it's not. So these are, pictures of the structure. So we have received, that was contact to our system, but the structure going out. So we went out to the property and it had actually reached those things here and stopped it, construction. So this is what's actually, up at this point is the concrete pad. And then there's some of it put into the structure. So the concrete pad, and this is just a little bit of the stop it this one, and this is the connection. The actually showing it on that, so that the name and so on, and so it will fall out on the property. And this is as you on the back side of the property, just kind of give you an idea of how the property actually falls down and flows down. So this is the side, this is the side, and this is the rear. But flows down quite substantially, going towards the rear. So they kind of fill all of the things here and actually just to give the structure up in the front. And he actually recently, and I did a permit, so he added on the back here. So it flows down here, it flows down here, and all of this on the side is a pond. And then there's water that comes in on the side from the pond. And this is the little portion of the rear property here. And this is actually considered resetting an area of the property here. So you can see the whole of the structure here. You can't tell so much in here where it's floating, but you can see on that here. And it's really even the water that come off through here. And then this is the gravel that comes down from the top of this here. And then this is the whole structure here. The metal building. And then the slope of the roof.
So the findings from staff, the reduction in the setback wouldn't be out of character for the development. It would be in an area that's not visible necessarily to the adjacent neighbors. The applicant has proposed that he would screen the structure if it were approved. However, based on the fact that it's so close to the road, staff is not able to recommend approval. And the fact that it's in the front yard, he has, as we've gone through the process, he has other permits that he has brought into our office and that we have approved in this particular circumstance. He had a contractor that was doing the work and they did not obtain the permits, just to make the board aware. But again, we are not able to recommend approval. Sherry did receive an email this morning from one of his neighbors. And so I'll read it because we didn't receive this in order to give it to the board. And it is from Bonnie Brenzy, one of the neighbors.
Christina, can I
Yeah.
ask you to relay that later? Because I will usually check with you guys after we do the public hearing. I do have a question. You said it wasn't visible, but I thought there was like a house right across the road there, which,
Oh, it's not directly,
one of the pictures that was taken from the property looked like there was the house across the road.
Can see a house in the picture with the top of the frame of it.
so I guess when
Yeah,
I
it's right
made
there.
that statement,
Yeah.
you can see it, but he recommended, or he stated that he would put screening up so that you couldn't see it.
Screening on the 18 feet of property that was left between the,
Right in front, right in front of the structure.
How tall is
And
the,
you can see it said, I mean, the survey said 18 feet, when they did on that, we measured from the structure to the street, we measured 35, 34 to 35 feet to the edge of the pavement. And we did the measurement. But they did an 18.7. But we did measurement to the actual pavement, and it was 30 per story.
right, but the property owner only controls that 18 feet, the rest is right of way. How tall will the building be? What kind of screening would be required to screen that tall of a building?
Required screening.
Let me,
What type of screening would be adequate to screen the building then?
it would be what, well, we'd have to ask Mr. Lewis what he would.
That was one second, I have to see what height we would be.
what's the same?
And those bay doors, the garage style doors, they're facing the road. Or, no,
No, they're not facing the road.
okay. So,
Can be.
Did you have anything else?
No, sir.
Any questions for Ms. Grover?
When did, construction start on?
I don't know exactly since we got the complaint. I couldn't tell you the exact date.
We did get a building, looks like we got a copy of the building quote, which was October 2021. So I would guess it started not long after that. And we can check with the
Yeah,
applicant.
I noticed that. I was
Check with
trying
the
to
applicant.
kind of confirm it.
Any other questions, Ms. Grover?
Just one real quick. The photograph that you showed us that shows the deck, the new deck on the side of the house and the view of the structure partially constructed with the firewood in the foreground. Is it fair to say that's pretty much all of the side yard area that,
There's
Yeah,
not much
okay,
left after that.
okay.
There is backyard available.
There's not a whole lot of backyard because it slopes down towards that pond. There would not be enough room to put that garage in the backyard. Now, on the adjacent side is where his septic field is located,
On the adjacent side.
on the opposite side of the house. And he has power lines on that side as well.
On the right side of the house?
On the left side of the
Oh, okay.
house.
Any other questions for Ms. Grover?
No, sir.
If not, we'll go ahead and move on to the Mrs. Lewis, if you want to step up and speak now.
Well, this has been a learning opportunity. So this has been about a year and a half long process of getting this garage put together. We ordered it, I'd say about a year and a half ago, and the person that we had, I guess, gone through had given us kind of in written statements. He was going to handle the building permits and everything that quite needed to be handled. We've done quite a bit of work at my house over the last, say, probably a year and a half, and everything that we've done has been by the book. So this was a shock to us. The day that they backed the trailer into the front yard to start construction was when we got a call from Ms. Grover. And of course, we ceased any sort of further movement at that moment. Of course, it was concerning to know that this was the case. We have since gone on to pursue legal action because this has obviously been a very costly mistake. We had no clue that when it came to the buildings that, well, first of all, that a company would flat out lie and say that they were going to hand. Yes, ma'am.
I just want, would you clarify who we are talking about? The contractor.
The company.
Because this quote is from Power Built Steel Building.
Correct. So this was a third party company that we had originally ordered the building from. So they were like acting as their salespeople. And the company that came in and did the building had called me about a week and a half ahead and said, hey, we're ready to come in, which I then just assumed that all the necessary paperwork had been handled. Everything was moving forward as planned. Because that
was that?
I'm sorry.
What company was that?
The company that we're suing.
Yeah.
Newmark Builders. And I'm hesitant to give that, but obviously, because I would like to see what the outcome of this is, because what my lawyer and I are doing is basically getting all the fees together and then simply gonna kind of deliver it to them. But nevertheless, this has certainly been, one of those experiences where I to be humbled is one thing, but to be flat out lied to is what I'm kind of dealing with. But nevertheless, my property, where we're putting this structure was the path of least resistance. As far as the property is concerned, the slopes that I've got to the right of the house and to the left of the house, I have power lines that run right through it. It's not that I didn't want to put it there, but it would have required me moving quite a bit of matured trees. And then of course, having to fight around my well, and next to the well would be the power lines. And then to the right is again, the slope. So where we put it was once again, kind of path of least resistance. It wasn't the most, how do I say, visually appealing place to put it, but it was what we had to work with the property that I've got, unfortunately. But I did, I don't know at what point I kind of share this information, but obviously, and as someone who's in my position, you become very vigilant towards the ones who already have structures in their front yards, and it does make you question a little bit as to what processes they went through. Were there any red tape for them? Nevertheless, I was able to get some. I didn't want to be like the neighbor to go by and stop at the middle of the road and take pictures of, that's not me. We live out here because we very much enjoy our solitude. But nevertheless, I was able to kind of get some Google Earth images and pins of locations that had multiple structures in their front yard, one of which just so happens to be in our backyard where the pond is, the neighbors that live kind of across the pond to us. Now, fortunately, they're not as much on the road as we are, but I've got a pretty good hunch that that's probably why this got caught as quickly as it did. I mean, it's my understanding the county doesn't go around looking for extra work. Neighbors and some of the neighbors that I have are somewhat connected to the county. I fear that was kind of a conflict of interest, but nevertheless, I have done some due diligence, gotten some pictures together of where there were multiple structures in front yards that were bigger than the ones that I was kind of going for, just not quite as much on the road as this was. Now I say on the road, fortunately, the way that my property is, there is a line of trees that comes all the way up. You can kind of see, I don't have to pull up the property line there. there's a slope of trees that come all the way up to the road that work as a natural barrier. So, I guess as looking at it from y'all's point of view, I could see how, if it was too close to the road, you would fear that someone may crash into it. There may be some sort of road hazard. Where those trees come out to would act as very much a natural barrier. I have told Ms. Grover that I'd be happy to, because at this point I'm tens of thousands of dollars deep into this project and really have nowhere else to put it, but more importantly, don't have the means to move the structure. I guess what I've kind of come to the conclusion of is if this doesn't really work out, then I'm gonna have to scrap it and move on. But nevertheless, I guess, is there any questions that I can answer for you guys or make this any easier?
Are you able to show, we have some black and white photos of, I think the aerial views you were describing.
Yes, sir.
Is there a way to describe them better, interpret them for us or show them on the screen or
Sure.
walk us through them?
And I'm sorry, which ones are you referring to? Gotcha. So on these forms, these are just simply, again, you become a little bit more vigilant when something like this happens. So these are properties that are all within about a 10-mile radius of my current house. All metal buildings, all built in the front of the yard. Again, some are more off the road than others. There is one, and I don't know what order you guys have the pictures in, but
So as you describe them, can you tell us how far off the road they are? Because we can't tell from the photographs whether or not
Of
they're a
course.
violation of the
So-
front setback or not.
a good,
And then secondly,
yes, sir, I'm sorry.
if they were permitted or not, or if they were done illegally.
That I have no clue of. I haven't gone about looking into others' business. I definitely don't want to be the red flag raiser. That's, again, why we live here is because we don't want an HOA and we don't want to, with all due respect, we mind each other's business. But nevertheless, so one of the pictures that I took had about a 30-foot RV parked in front of. I don't know if you guys can see that one, but that is a pretty good wager of a measurement. If you were to twist that, it's about 30 feet from the road. And this is a structure that frankly, it oversizes the house. But it is right on the road. It is in front of the house. It is,
I travel Mansfield Road every day and I'm not real clear that garage
yes, ma'am,
isn't in line with the house.
for sure. And so there's an aerial picture that I have from Google Maps that gives you a little bit more perspective. It's, again, without trespassing, it's tough to say, but it's close enough to where it would at least, I guess, for the concerns that the county might have in this variance, it was more so kind of the distance to the road was very similar, albeit mine is more in front of the house. And the only reason that is the case is frankly, I have nowhere else to be able to put this and not have to move water or power lines, which I can't do. My well is in place, my septic is in place. Those are things that I really can't do anything about, but I kind of was working with the ground that God gave me. So,
As Ms. Broadus pointed out on that first photograph, although it may be 30 or 40 feet off of the right of way, which I'm assuming that's the same 75-foot minimum front yard setback in that zone.
In that vicinity or AC.
Right.
It's pretty much AC district.
So while that structure may violate the minimum setback, that setback was already set by the house, the pre-existing house, I'm assuming. So they didn't make a condition anything worse than the house already.
I got you, yes, sir.
And Christina, you didn't have the opportunity to go through these to see if they were legally permitted, did you?
No, sir, I didn't have the
Okay.
addresses for all of them.
Okay. Do you care to go through the rest of them with us?
I mean, the main one that I see here that would be a pretty good basis off what we're trying to do, or at least looking to get done. In a So this is the one that's at 257 Etna Mills Road. This is the house that lives behind us on the pond. And you can see where I've circled at least one structure, but you can see there are multiple. And it's my understanding that the front of the house is the house that faces the roadway. So the ability to get in and out of the property. This one has at least one, if not three, it looks like structures that were built in the front yard, because I know around it, it's a little tough to see because it's black and white, but that is all the pond. So there's nothing but water. I mean, they're kind of in a similar predicament that I'm in, whereas we're kind of waterlocked to an extent. And then of course, power line locked and slope locked to where, this is no cheap endeavor, but wherever we can cut costs is why we kind of put it in the spot that we put it. It was just the path of least resistance.
So 257 Etna Mills Road, does that sit on a private lane or is it front on a public road? In other words, the property itself doesn't go all the way out to Etna Mills Road, does it?
It does. As a matter of fact, their property comes around to the front of my property. So they own the pond exclusively. That property line goes all the way around the pond because of legal reasons. I guess when they sold the property, they parceled it out to where the entire pond would forever be in their ownership. And that pond comes right to the road. So there's actually a culvert piping that goes underneath of the road that would connect the creek to the pond that feeds the pond.
Yeah. So while there may be many structures in front of that house, there are certainly all plenty further behind Etna Mills Road. They're
For sure.
they're
And that's,
further than
yeah, that
75
wasn't
feet from Etna
quite
Mills Road.
the comparison I was trying to make. It was just more so from a variance standpoint, they are in front of the house. And if it's my understanding that the variance is they have to be behind the house, and, the roadway just simply makes it to. And again,
Not necessarily behind the house, but they have to be behind the front setback line.
yes, sir. And I think my understanding of a setback line would be if you take a parallel line from the front of the house, I presume.
Now, it's measured from the street, so many feet back, and then the zone at 75 feet back.
I got you. Yes, sir.
Your house happens to be set back 75 feet from the street.
Yes, sir. Yes,
So in
sir.
your case, yes, it's consistent with the front of your house.
Yes, sir. So that I guess that makes more sense. Like I said, this has been this is by no stretch of the imagination my strong suit. This has been a huge learning opportunity. I just kind of wish I had known before I had broken ground that this was going to even be an issue.
I certainly recognize the hardships or your challenges, your setbacks from the well, from your setback, your septic system, and even the pond.
Yes, sir.
I don't know what the regulations would be on the pond, if there's a buffer to it or not.
Yes, sir.
But it looks like you've taken up some of that area with an addition to a deck on your house anyway.
Yes, yes, sir. And I know, at least when we went through the building permit for the deck, there was quite a bit of measurement going on, because I think their fear was that it was going to start encroaching on, I guess, what is considered to be wetlands or something of that aspect.
And Mr. Nolan, it's a man-made lake, so there are not any RPA or wetlands.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like I said, I don't, she would know better than I, but I know there was quite a bit of, I think when the deck was, believe it or not, the hardest part of the build, we had to wait quite a few weeks to get that approved.
Anyone else have questions for Mr. Lewis?
Am I allowed to ask any more?
I was just gonna ask, that it does appear that there is, I know you say that the backyard is sloping,
Yes, ma'am.
but it does appear to be, a somewhat, large area in the backyard.
Yeah, it can be kind of deceitful because my property line cuts through about half of that backyard. So if you look, I don't know if you can pull up the survey that I had done.
So-
Yeah, yes, ma'am. So I know that the black and white one looks a little different, whereas the aerial picture that I've got, if you were to look at it, this came to my attention, because I was under the impression I had much more backyard than I did, but once I had it surveyed to have the addition put on, it's not very much backyard at all. And it's very sloped. I mean, the entire backyard just is about a 30 degree grade that goes right into the pond. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I don't know if could you pull up the aerial, the one that I took with, I think I emailed it over to you. I guess that big overhead shot. Yeah, yes, ma'am.
I imagine that the grade would be something that could be modified.
It is, however, with the modification, I think there's certain restrictions, whereas if you bring in fill dirt or something along those lines, it makes it to where it's got an unstable base. So permitting you put, let's say a 20-ton concrete slab down, 20 ton on dirt that's just been moved really cracks it, breaks the foundation, causes a ton of issues kind of later on down the road. So that's, again, why we decided to go against that.
Then there's the alternative, because you were talking about existing locations in the county that had the same situation as yourself. If we look at Dixon's on 360.
Yes, ma'am.
They're taking advantage of the sloping
Yes, ma'am.
ground by going down.
Yes, ma'am.
Versus trying to fill.
For sure. No, I completely understand that. I know the way that it works too. So because I live such close to a body of water, my septic field has to be pumped and moved over to a higher ground because of, I guess, the gravity or whatever the water does. But the fact that it pumps up and goes through. So the back of my house, the line for it goes all the way up to the top left portion of my property. So there's PVC going all through that. Whereas if I did dig down, that would be close, really, really close. And again, I know it's tough to give you kind of a aerial, but there is not much backyard back there. I mean, for the 30 by 30 structure that we're looking to do, I think my backyard is maybe 10 feet wider. It's that property line would be so close to where that would be, whereas I'm sure it would be, again, encroaching on the line or, whatever it is, we kind of be at the same circumstance.
Anybody else have any more questions?
Construction, did it start after you got the quote from Powerville?
Construction. So this is where it gets a little confusing. I don't know if obviously you guys are living in today's society. So if you order anything right now, you are waiting a tremendous amount of time.
Yeah.
So where I first picked up with the gentleman who had sent me emails stating he was going to handle all of the permits, all of the necessary kind of things that needed to be done before we built. We had stayed in contact for the first couple months, but of course then left off because we were simply waiting on the actual contractor builders to come in and put the building up. So in that 8-month period where we didn't have any contact, I was under the assumption that everything was being absolutely handled. I had no inklings to think that it wouldn't be.
And you didn't provide us any documentation on that correspondence?
My lawyer has insisted that I keep everything, because if this doesn't work out, then obviously I'm going to have to spend, I'm going to have to figure out how I'm going to get more money to do another variance. And I'm not going to be able to move it anywhere else. I just need to get what the entire cost of this is going to be and set it on their desk and say, here's your 2 options. That's what he's kind of explained for me to do. But once obviously I get compensated, I will give you guys all the information that you need to ensure that none of this happens to anybody else, because this has been an absolute nightmare, to say the least, from a financial standpoint. And
Unfortunately, it's not up to us.
right, and yes, ma'am,
keep it from
I know that.
happening.
I've been waiting on this for a long time, so I'm sure my wife's tired of hearing about it.
So I just, construction started after this date, October 14th.
I'm sorry, what date are you referring to?
On the power bill.
Oh, well,
for
most
that
definitely,
building.
yeah. So this was, I mean, I can pull you up like receipts of when I left my deposit. This was like well before Christmas, so like almost Thanksgiving of last year. That we put the deposit down, and then of course, waited for the rest of it to kind of be put into motion. So
Mr. Lewis, can you approximate when the concrete slab was poured?
that was soon. That was probably 3-4 months ago. Not long
So this
ago.
year.
Yeah, oh, yeah, no, so I was instructed not to pour the concrete until the builder called me to let me know of a date when they were gonna come and construct. So they could then do their framing to the concrete, and everything kind of had a chance to be settled, if you will. But that, yeah, the concrete was, and of course I had to save up money to be able to do that, but that was poured probably 3-4 months ago.
So were there no inspections required by the county when you did that work?
For the concrete. Once again, this is taking the word of a contractor, which has been proven to be quite a bad decision. But no, that's I was told by him that there was no sort of permits needed. You can pour concrete. Here's when I'll be here. Handshake type. And now, of course, I've got receipts on everything. I mean, they poured the footers to the exact specifications of what we needed for the garage. And as a matter of fact, the gentleman that did it has done a tremendous amount of work in King William. He works with, I don't know if I'm allowed to say names, but there's a lot of builders that he works with in the King William area. So I actually got his name from those guys who I trust. And I kind of trusted in that they were giving me accurate information. But like I said, this has been quite eye-opening.
Anyone else? Come on. I got a question. As you were trying to determine the size of the building,
Yes, sir.
what work did you do yourself to make sure that the appropriate size would be in ordinance, in compliance with the ordinance?
As far as what type of like size of the building we were going for, really, I've relied so heavily on contractors in the past to give me the information that I would need and tell me what I can and can't do. And again, like I shared with you before, in the last 2 years, we've added about a 520 square foot addition onto the home, multiple decks. We've been saving all our lives to do this, but they had always kind of walked us through the motions and told us what we could and could not do. And I was just, again, the phone call that I got a week and a half before this construction started taking place was, hey, when would you like us? When's a good day for us to start? And I just assumed that that was a green light on all aspects. I didn't have any reason to question. I had everything in writing. I had paid fees basically for them to handle these things. So that's the dilemma that I was in. I work at a car dealership, so I know, how binding emails and contracts can be, which is why I'm pretty certain I'll be able to afford all this, but I'm hoping I'll be able to get my money back out of it.
So when you were conjuring up the idea of actually putting this garage out there,
Yes, sir.
what determined the size factor of the 30 by 31 by 10? I mean,
So that size from a cost standpoint was the least expensive, but the greatest yield, if you will. That was a pure budget move. Anything that would have been longer was more expensive. Anything that would have been taller would have been more expensive. And what we were looking for is the ability to house a boat that my dad and I have kind of gone in together on, which was the reason for the size. It was just the best bang for your buck, if you will.
Did you have somebody come on site to do the evaluation to see, okay, here's what you're conjuring up. You're feeling like a 30 by 31 by 10 will fit your need. Does somebody come on site and measure it between the road and the?
So, yes, sir. So no, by no stretch of the imagination am I anything close to a contractor or anything of those sorts. However, a tape measure and a friend to hold it will give you a pretty good idea of what you need as far as these metal buildings are concerned. The fact that it wasn't going to have any plumbing, any sort of electrical, there was a lack of need for extra people to get involved. So I was just kind of basing it off of the one guy that I was dealing with, who I'll leave unnamed at the moment because that's who we're pursuing legal actions against, and myself. And it was just, here's my budget, here's what I needed to fit, and when can we do it? And obviously making sure that everything was going to be in correlation with the county and everything that we needed it to be, because we've always let our contractors handle these things.
Any other questions? Board? Mr. Nolan?
No.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you very much for y'all's time. I appreciate it.
Next, we'll open the floor to public comment period for the variance request B-02-22. Individuals will have one opportunity of 3 minutes per individual or 5 minutes per group or organization. Those who wish to speak in favor that the variance request be granted may come up at this time. No, I'll skip the Zoom part. It doesn't look like anybody's on Zoom. So if you're in favor of this variance request, I would ask that you come up now to speak. Please be sure to give us your name and address for the record. Okay. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition or denial of the variance request? Please make yourself known at this time. Mr. Wagner?
Chairman Shoemaker and members of the BZA, my name is Don Wagner, and I live in the fifth district, excuse me. I am a member of the Planning Commission, but I am not speaking for the Planning Commission. I'm speaking on my own behalf. The applicant has pretty well explained this situation, and it's a very unfortunate situation. But I would have to remind the BZA that it is a responsibility of the owner of the property to assure that all permits and approvals are in place prior to beginning any construction, including land disturbance. This argument should not be considered in the BZA's decision for a variance. This is a neighborhood of modest homes with reasonably well-maintained properties and no apparent obstructions in front yards of the homes in the immediate neighborhood. The site of this carport within 18.7 feet of the front property line represents a flagrant violation of the required 75-foot front yard setback and is in the front to the neighboring properties that could have an impact on their property values. Incidentally, the 75-foot setback is from the right-of-way or the front property line, not from the pavement, not from the edge of the road. The applicant states that due to this slope in the body of the water in the backyard, that the property there's no other place to put the building. I would argue, just from my review of the information provided and the site visit, looking at it, I would argue that that could have been placed in another location. Had the applicant or had the applicant's contractor gone to the Planning Commission, the Planning Commission would have advised them of all the issues that were involved there. And they could have, I'm sure they could have at that point in time had an opportunity to find a better location. And I believe there could be a better location on that property. The slope from the road going back to the back of the house could have been graded out so that it could have been either on that side yard on the same side or in the backyard possibly. But Excuse me. Just a minute. Well, that's basically all I had to say. Again, this is an unfortunate situation, but because of the way it was handled, it's unfortunate, but because of the way it was handled, the request for a variance should definitely be denied. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wagner. We also received a written correspondence from Mr. Wagner. I think everybody's got copies of that. Yes, sir. Okay, did the applicant receive a copy of this?
No.
Okay. It pretty much restates what Mr. Wagner just talked about, but I can actually have somebody read it. I didn't bring my glasses. If you want to read this? Just so that they have a chance to rebut
Chairman
it.
Shoemaker and members of the BZA, as a member of the Planning Commission, I have serious concerns with the subject BZA case as the requested variance would be a flagrant violation of the setback requirements in our zoning ordinance. With development of the updates to the zoning and subdivision ordinances and the recent adoption of the comprehensive plan, we received over 1,200 responses to questionnaires from our citizens, overwhelmingly in favor of protecting and preserving the rural areas of our county. With that in mind, I submit the following review of variance request V02 2022 for your review and consideration. Review of BZA application V02 2022 to construct a 30 by 30 carport in the front yard of tax map parcel 19D5. This is a request for variance on property located at 129 Edmund Mills Road to construct a carport in the front yard within the 75-foot required setback from the front property line and within 18.7 feet of the front property line. The applicant alleges that he had hired a third-party contractor to complete the construction of the carport and that the third-party builder stated that he would obtain the necessary permits and approvals from the county. Apparently, such approvals were not obtained, and the builder or contractor placed a fill area in the front yard over the existing driveway and had placed the 30 by 30 concrete pad and steel framework for the carport. I would remind the BZA that it is the responsibility of the owner of the property to assure that all permits and approvals are in place prior to beginning any construction, including land disturbance. This argument should not be considered in the BZA's decision on a variance. This is a neighborhood of modest homes with reasonably well-maintained properties and no apparent obstructions in the front yards of the homes in the immediate neighborhood. The sitting of this carport within 18.7 feet of the front property line represents a flagrant violation of the required 75-foot front yard setback and is an affront to neighboring properties that could have an impact on property values. The applicant states that due to the slope and body of water in the back of the property, there is no other place to put the building. In reviewing the property lines, the aerial view, the photographs of the side and rear yards and pond, as well as an on-site review, it appears that the rear yard is high enough above the pond level that the existing entrance could have been graded beside the house to the rear yard to allow the carport to be constructed either at the end of the house or in the backyard. Owner has not provided any evidence to the contrary other than his statement. The question to be considered by the BZA, is this requested variance a necessity for the property, or is it merely a convenience for the property owner? I would certainly recommend against approval of this request. Respectfully submitted, Don Wagner.
Thank you, Ms. Broadus. Appreciate that, feeding that back to us. So you guys can have the chance to rebut that. Are there any other individuals that wish to speak in opposition of the variance request? Okay, being there are none, I'll go ahead and close the public comment period.
Mr. Chairman, do you mind if I ask a question of our planner, of Christina?
Yeah, sure.
Do you mind bringing up the image of the survey that has the well and septic setbacks shown on it? I don't believe that was in our packet.
It was not, I just got that information back.
So the setback you have on the well, is that, I can't read it from here, is that 100 feet?
Yeah, he's got the 100 feet that's outside, I think that's just his radius.
Yeah, that's on the radius, is a 100-foot radius from the well? And is that to any structure or just to an occupied structure?
Normally it's 100 feet from anything that's gonna be termite treated or treated, with chemicals. It can't be reduced to 50, if it's gonna be non-treated. But that's the.
Would a concrete and steel building be something that wouldn't necessarily be termite treated?
They may reduce it to 50.
Okay. So there's possibility that he could build the structure in compliance with the zoning if he put it on the left side of the house, as long as it was at least 50 feet from the well.
If the health department will approve it.
And that's assuming the grade of the lot would allow for that.
He's got power lines, the power lines are on that side. And he has to be behind the front plane of that house, the way the zoning ordinance is written right now.
We can debate that. We have debated that.
I know. We're trying to change it. We're talking to the planning commission this month.
Okay. Well, until it's changed, it's still 75 feet. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that there were no other, I wanted to see if there were other opportunities for the other alternatives for the applicant.
Thank you. Ms. Grover, did you receive any contacts in support or opposition since the packet was put together other than Mr. Wagner's?
And we did.
Correspondence.
We received one from a neighbor in support.
You want to go ahead and speak to that, please?
So this is from a neighbor, Bonnie Breezy. You want me to read it
Would you please?
entirety?
Yeah, and can you make sure they can hear that? Thank you.
I received a recent letter in regards to one of my neighbors, Zachary Lewis, request to put a detached garage on his property. I understand the position of this garage does not meet the required zoning ordinance currently in place. I own the property at 90 Etna Mills Road, adjacent to Mr. Lewis's property. His property has very little room to do anything other than the position he is currently requesting. I am writing this email in support of Mr. Lewis. I feel he should be allowed to put this detached garage anywhere on his property that he feels it is available and that it meets the needs that he expects from this building. He is always making improvements to his property and has always gone by the rules, and I do not feel as a property owner in this county that he should not be allowed to do so. This garage in no way will have a negative impact on anyone surrounding his property. I appreciate the board considering and including my opinion as a surrounding property owner in this decision for Mr. Lewis. I hope that Mr. Lewis will get the approvals he needs to move forward on his building. Sincerely, Bonnie Breezy.
I have a question.
Thank you. Any others?
We did get an opposition that I talked about earlier, but I'm not sure if they.
I have a question about the permitting process. Is a contractor able to get the permit on behalf of the landowner without their signature? Okay.
Okay, so at this point, based on the procedures that we follow, the applicant gets the opportunity to make closing remarks, any kind of rebuttal, any kind of comments that you heard that may have been negative or in opposition, you have a chance to actually speak on that. If you want to come up at this time.
Super brief. My hope is that with this garage, if anything, it would probably increase property value around the surrounding properties. I'm not sure where the opposition resides or where they're at, but I know all my neighbors very well around me, and I've never heard or seen of this person. So I can't see how on a moral level this would make any sense to go about opposition in it. Other than driving by it, in which case I would say drive around King William, and you'll see plenty of steel structures that are in plain sight and plain view. I'm sure as most of you live here, you can probably see that. My goal is to not devalue my house or anyone's. Frankly, the point of this was to raise the value. So, but that's kind of where I'd leave off. And again, I apologize to anyone I've inconvenienced. This has been quite a learning opportunity. And a costly one at that. I can only hope that what we pursue compensates back for a little bit of what we've had to spend to learn this lesson. But again, I appreciate everybody's consideration and time, more importantly. Thank you.
Just like, does anybody have any further questions for the applicant?
Mr. Lewis, you're not inconveniencing us. We're here to serve the constituents. If anybody
Yes, sir.
has been inconvenienced in this whole thing, it's been you. Do you have any comment as to whether or not the structure could be built on the left side of your house and what that would mean to you?
With everything taken into consideration, the reasoning for where I put that structure, because at the end of the day, it's not that was where I wanted it to go. It was just where my property allowed it to go. The aerial videos or the aerial pictures that I've taken would show that the power lines that cut directly through the belly of my property would make it extremely tough to put it to the left, let alone, or not even to mention the well that I've got right there. I mean, it would require myself having to put quite a bit of funds towards moving many mature trees, many tons of dirt to kind of contest to the slope, if you will. But again, just from a pure property standpoint, I mean, unfortunately, I've got wells that are stretched out. I've got drain fields that go across the property, whereas a lot of people don't have to fight those types of things, where they can have the kind of gravity drain fields that go right out the back of the house. This one, I got a pond in my backyard, so it needs to be pumped across the property. Therefore, I can't really build anything in between those two places because I've got PVC piping going through the ground.
It looks like the PVC piping to the drain field would be behind the house and next to it. I've heard the power lines mentioned a few times. Are they above ground or underground, and where are they on?
They're above ground. I don't know if you can pull up that aerial shot that I took with. You can kind of see where they've come through and cleared out. There you go. Beautiful. So see where they've cleared out that area for the power lines to come through. That space in between the house and those power lines is probably, I'd say 40 feet most, 40 to 50 feet. I mean, I haven't measured it exactly, but it's surrounded by trees,
It
slopes.
looks like those power lines run pretty much parallel to that driveway next to you. Is that?
No,
fair?
sir. So if you can see kind of the truck that's parked right there, you can see the power lines, they come right through it. And, again, that's an easement for the power company. So I'd be hard pressed to put a structure where I know there's going to be heavy equipment coming through, limbs being cut down. There's a lot of reasons why we put this garage there.
Because I'm seeing 136 feet from your sideline to the house. I can't imagine the power lines are taking up all 136 feet of that. And I don't see an easement on your survey. So either it's been missed or the power company may not have an easement there.
Well, I believe I guess from what I understand, they can come on the property and trim away trees at their leisure, because I had no sort of notice on that.
Only if they have an easement.
Other than that's the only way that they would do it. I mean, I can assure you I didn't clear any of that stuff, and they've been through in the last couple of weeks and done those.
Wouldn't be the first time the power company came and cleared
Right,
the lines
yes,
that
sir,
they put
right.
in without an easement.
I just assumed. I mean, again, they weren't causing any harm. I just assumed they were keeping us from losing power, which would be the main thing. But at any rate, what you can't see and what's really unfortunate is under those trees, that is not flat ground. that is all sloped towards the pond. If you've been near any sort of body of water, you'll know that the natural slope of the land goes towards the water. Everything back there is hills and slopes. That's again, I mean, it's, I would have loved to have put it there. It wasn't that I didn't want to. Again, I got to work with the property that God gave me. So that's kind of what I'm doing.
Anyone else have any more questions for the applicant? Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you very much.
Questions for Ms. Grover? Okay, does the board feel it is sufficiently informed and ready to make a decision? It's a tough one. Okay, without objection, in accordance with Virginia Code 15.2-2309, powers and duties of the Board of Zoning Appeals, I'll entertain a motion to either approve or deny the variance request.
I make a motion to deny, and I apologize, but, I know it says on this quote that the customer was to verify the permits. Also, I have concerns that if we approve it, this will come before us again, that, just that I didn't know, and, and I hate to say it, but there just needs to be some responsibility on the property owner to make sure ordinances are being followed and permits are being gotten.
All right, so we have a motion to deny the variance request. Do I have a second?
Mr. Chairman, I'll second that with the justification that based on the information provided and what we're seeing in the application, there may be other alternatives. Recognize the challenges of building the building next to the house or behind the house on the right side. But I think there's other opportunity on the property that could have been in compliance with the ordinance. And I agree with Mr. Wagner's assessment that we shouldn't be approving variances for structures that violate the setback this egregiously. If it was a matter of a couple of feet, maybe we could consider it, but not this much. We can't be 18 feet away from the road where 75 feet is required.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. It was properly seconded by Mr. Nolan, and with discussion, any other discussion?
I agree with the assessment that I think there were a lot of excuses that there weren't alternative locations, but I believe that just looking at the area that there was something to be done. And also, I don't believe that large of a structure in the front yard that close to the road would bring up property values. I would argue that it would be a detriment.
Especially to the house directly across from it.
Any other discussion? I'd like to make a comment. Mr. Lewis, though this was, the board empathizes with you and your situation, approving such a request only relieves the accountability from the contractors who you entrust to check local zoning ordinance requirements and pulling necessary permits. I personally cannot and would not approve such request, as it would set a precedent for other contractors to negate their responsibilities. If you haven't already done so, I strongly suggest that you seek legal counsel, which it sounds like you already have. Also suggest that you consider filing a complaint with the State Corporation Commission as well as the Business Bureau. So if there's no further discussion,
And I agree, I empathize. This was a tough decision to make.
if there's no further discussion, Ms. Grover, could you call for the votes?
Ms. Walker?
Aye.
Ms. Broadus?
Aye.
Mr. Nolan?
Aye.
And Mr. Schumacher?
Aye. The variance request B-02-2022 is denied. Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Okay, next on the agenda, we have the comprehensive plan and other updates. Ms. Grove or Ms. Graham?
So we have the comprehensive plan and future land use map adopted as of May 23rd. It went to the planning commission in May and went to the board of supervisors in May. And it is officially adopted.
Congratulations.
One thing that the planning commission is working on, they are taking a look at the recent ordinance that was adopted. And there's a couple of things that they are going to be looking at for possible changes. So if you know of anything that you want them to revisit, please let us know.
I think,
We imagine the clarification that we spoke of,
Yeah.
Just the clarification.
would you not, would need something in writing for that or?
No, that's already in there.
Okay, very good.
I mean, we had, what, 5 variance requests this year for the same thing, so, yeah.
Anything else?
I think that's it, unless you can look at anything.
You had mentioned there may have been a potential upcoming appeal.
Yeah, and that's probably gonna be coming before you.
Okay, we don't have any, do we have any tentative dates?
I've been talking back and forth with Mr. Buckman. So not yet, we're working on a couple of things.
Okay, anything else? Okay, if there's no other business before us, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.